What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning show and walks straight into an ambush? What happens when a seasoned journalist tosses aside all professionalism, turning a routine interview into a full-blown character assassination? You're about to witness a moment that sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. A televised clash so raw, so explosive. It ended with security being called, and one of the biggest stars in the industry being escorted off the set of Good Morning America. This is the story of how George Stephanopoulos crossed every line in broadcast journalism, and how Michael B. Jordan, known for his grace under pressure, was pushed to his breaking point on Lev TV. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Michael's shoes? It was supposed to be a typical Tuesday morning at the GMA studios in Times Square. Michael B. Jordan arrived early, looking sharp in a tailored navy suit, ready to promote his newest directorial project. He'd done this dance hundreds of times. Quick questions about his latest film, some light banter, maybe a personal anecdote or two. But this wasn't that kind of interview. From the moment he sat down, something felt off. George Stephanopoulos was unusually tense, shuffling his notes with laser focus, barely making eye contact. Crew members noticed it. Even the makeup artists later said George refused his usual coffee, barely spoke. Then the cameras rolled. The upbeat Good Morning America theme faded out, and in its place came a tone nobody saw coming. Michael B. Jordan. "Welcome to Good Morning America," George said, his voice tight. "Though I have to wonder, are you as comfortable being here as you pretend to be?" Michael gave a cool smile, eyebrows raised ever so slightly. "Good morning, George. Great to be here. Not sure what you mean by pretending, but I'm always happy to talk about my work." But George wasn't interested in the work. He leaned in, eyes sharp. "Let's talk about how you've built a career playing characters who stand for integrity, while your real life tells a very different story." The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators exchanged uneasy glances. Michael stayed composed at first. "I'm sorry. What exactly are you referring to?" George rifled through his notes like a prosecutor about to pounce. "I think you know. The carefully calculated persona. The PR-crafted image of the humble golden boy. The reality is very different. George, I came here to talk about my new film." Michael replied, the edge creeping into his voice. "If you've got questions about my work, I'm happy to answer. But I'm not sure what you're implying." "What I'm implying?" George said, voice rising, "is that America deserves to know who you really are. Not the polished version your publicity team sells. The real Michael B. Jordan." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Michael's jaw clenched. "The real me is sitting right here. I work hard. I respect the craft. I try to use my platform responsibly. That's the truth." And then came the moment that turned the interview into a full-blown interrogation. George scoffed. On live television. Responsibility. That's rich. From someone who's shut out other actors, used his influence to make sure you stay at the top while others barely get a shot. Michael's eyes flashed. "That's completely false, and frankly, insulting. I've spent years mentoring young talent. My production company exists to create opportunities for people who look like me and those who don't. I don't know where you're getting your information, but it's wrong." George smirked. "Is it wrong? Or just inconvenient for your narrative? Tell me, how many times have you campaigned behind the scenes against other black actors? How many times have you made sure the competition never even got a shot?" It was the kind of question so outrageous, even the veteran production crew froze. In the green room, Michael's publicist leapt to her feet, frantically signaling the producers to cut. Michael's voice dropped to a cold, steady quiet. "I don't know what game you're playing here, George. But you're way out of line. I've never campaigned against anyone. I've never tried to sabotage another actor's career. And the fact that you would sit here and throw that kind of accusation, without facts, tells me everything I need to know. George wasn't done. The industry, he said mockingly. The industry you've manipulated to your advantage. Where you've convinced everyone you're a humble artist while behaving like a corporate shark. How does it feel to know your success came at the expense of people who were more talented, but less politically savvy? Michael's knuckles turned white as he gripped the arms of his chair. More talented, he echoed, and the tension in the room hit its peak. And that's when producers cut the feed. The screen faded to black. What happened next? Security was called. Michael was escorted out a private exit. George, he reportedly refused to leave his desk for over an hour. The fallout? Massive. The clip went viral in minutes. Viewers were outraged, some siding with George, most condemning the ambush. ABC has remained tight-lipped. But insiders say there's an internal review underway. Michael, George, are you really sitting there on national television questioning my talent? Suggesting I don't deserve the success I've worked for since I was a kid? George, cool, smug. I'm suggesting talent isn't the only reason people succeed. And you know that better than anyone. Our viewers deserve to understand how the sausage really gets made in Hollywood, especially when someone like you tries to play the role model. Michael, steady. Incredulous role model. I've tried to be. I've used my platform to inspire, to represent my community with pride and dignity. And if that threatens you, if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe the problem isn't with me. But George's face twitched. The pretense of objectivity was cracking. George, defensive, sharp, threatens me? That's exactly the kind of arrogance I'm talking about. The assumption that everyone who challenges you must be jealous or intimidated. Michael's, leaning forward. Tone rising. No, George. I think you're trying to create a moment. Manufacture controversy where there is none. You've turned this from an interview into a personal ambush. And frankly, I'm starting to wonder why. The control room buzzed with confusion. Crew members exchanged glances. This wasn't on the rundown. George, a voice tightening, mask slipping. Oh, you want personal. Everything about your career is personal. Personal connections. Personal favors. Deals made in rooms no one gets to see. You want to talk about journalism. Journalism exposes the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Michael, voice cutting through. Expose the truth. You haven't given a single fact. Not one. This isn't journalism, George. This is a hit job. And I'm starting to think you're driven by something a whole lot uglier. George, snapping. My motivation is to serve our audience. People who want real conversations, not another rehearsed press junket designed to sell tickets. Michael's standing, commanding. You want real. I came here ready to talk about the work, the art, the stories I'm trying to tell. You turned it into an inquisition. Based on what? Rumors, gossip, or maybe your own issue with successful black men in Hollywood. Gasps rippled across the studio. George's face flushed dark purple. George, furious, rising. Don't you dare. Don't you turn this into a race thing when this is about accountability. You don't get to hide behind identity when the questions get tough. Michael, voice booming now. No filter left. I don't hide behind anything, George. I carry it. I own it. And it makes every win, every role, every damn step forward mean more, because I know what I had to overcome to get here. And the fact that you'd minimize that struggle shows me exactly who you are. George, mocking. Who I am. I'm someone who's spent decades asking the tough questions. I don't get starstruck or played by rehearsed speeches in designer suits. Michael, stepping forward, towering now. No, you get petty. You get personal. You try to assassinate someone's character on live TV without a shred of evidence. I've worked since I was a kid. Grinding, learning. Building something real while navigating rejection and discrimination you can't even imagine. George is standing his ground. I have sources, Michael. People who've worked with you. People who know how you operate off camera. The phone calls, the pressure, the manipulation. Michael's coldy, then name them. You say you have proof, then present it. Enough with the shadows. Either put up or shut up. A long beat. George opened his mouth, and nothing came out. The silence was deafening. George finally weakly, I protect my sources. Michael's instantly, no, you protect them because they don't exist. You know, if you had to show actual evidence, this whole farce would collapse. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear me down with nothing but your own resentment. The air was thick. No music. No cues. Just the sound of a media empire crumbling in real time. And now you're hiding behind journalistic ethics. The same ethics you tossed aside the second you turned this into an ambush. George's carefully polished mask cracked. What emerged was raw, unfiltered resentment. Georgie, you know what, Michael? You're right. This is personal. Because I'm sick of watching actors like you get applauded for doing the bare minimum while real journalists, real storytellers, get ignored. You play dress up for a living. You entertain. That's it. And somehow you're treated like a cultural prophet. It's insulting. The studio fell silent. Even the seasoned crew froze. No one had ever seen a network anchor unravel like this. Michael stared at George, stunned. It wasn't just a professional attack. It was personal, deeply personal. Ike's quietly, dangerously real people who actually matter. So now actors don't matter. Storytellers don't matter. You honestly believe that what we do has no value. Or is this just your bitterness talking, George? Because it sure sounds like someone resenting his own relevance fading. Georgie, snapping bitter. About my career. I've won Emmys. I've sat across from presidents. I've reported from war zones. I've changed the national conversation with my reporting. I don't need validation from Hollywood or from actors who think a fan base makes them important. Mike yells, cutting in. Then why are you here, George? Why do you interview people like me? If actors contribute nothing, why does your show rely on us to drive ratings? Why does Good Morning America book film stars if we're so meaningless? George didn't answer. He couldn't. The hypocrisy hung in the air like smoke. Michael pressed on. McShichiel, I'll tell you why. Because without us, without actors, musicians, artists, this show has no audience. You need us to keep your job relevant. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Giorgio with Venom terrifies me. I've been in this industry since you were doing teen dramas and daytime soap operas. I didn't build my career on red carpets and magazine covers. I earned it through hard, serious journalism. Michael's composure broke. Finally, McSale, those teen dramas and soap operas were my foundation. That's where I learned discipline. Range, craft. You mock it because you've never had to expose your soul in front of a camera and be judged for every breath. That's the difference between us. You tear people down from behind a desk. I put myself out there, and you clearly have no respect for that. Georgie's voice rising, nearly unhinged respect. You want to talk about respect? How about respecting this platform? Respecting the questions? Respecting the fact that viewers at home expect professionalism, not a self-congratulatory monologue about your journey. Michael looked around the studio. Shell-shocked producers, sound engineers frozen behind the glass. The entire room felt like it was holding its breath. Shiel firm-lithe. I've been respectful. George, I sat here and answered your questions, even when they stopped being questions and became thinly veiled attacks. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. But let's stop pretending. You didn't invite me here for an interview. You brought me here to humiliate me, not for journalism, but because of your own insecurity. That's not ethics. That's ego. The silence was suffocating. George's next move only confirmed every word Michael had just said. Georgius exploding personal issues. You think this is about personal issues. This is about integrity, something you clearly wouldn't recognize if it slapped you across that perfectly sculpted face. His voice cracked with rage. Georgius Conti. You show up with your entourage, your publicist feeding you lines, and expect me to roll over for your scripted narrative. You want control over the questions, the tone, the edit. You don't want a conversation, you want PR. Michael's eyes widened. Michael Entourage. George. My publicist is sitting in the green room. Like every other guest's rep, I made no demands about questions. You're inventing fiction on Lev TV to justify your tantrum. George laughed. It was sharp, erratic, untethered. Grge. Oh, please. Spare me the innocent act. You're all the same. Fragile egos hiding behind fake humility in award show speeches. The moment had spiraled. The tension was no longer just palpable. It was toxic. Michael didn't yell. He didn't flinch. He simply stood. Michael low and clear. This interview is over. He walked off the set. And George just stood there, alone, exposed, and very, very live. I'm making things up. That's rich coming from a man whose entire career depends on make-believe. George sneered. At least when I report the news, it's grounded in fact, not fantasy. Michael's tone sharpened, rising to meet George's escalating fury. Facts. George, you haven't presented a single fact this entire interview. Just wild accusations, cheap shots, and now you're inventing fake scenarios about demands I never made. This isn't journalism. It's a meltdown, and it's happening live. Inside the control room, chaos erupted. Producers shouted into headsets. Torn between cutting to commercial, ending the segment, or letting the train wreck continue. Before they could decide, George crossed a line no broadcaster ever should. You know what your problem is, Michael, George said as he suddenly stood, circling the desk like a predator. He closed the distance, towering over the guest uncomfortably. Your problem is you've been told you're special for so long. You actually believe it. You've been coddled and worshipped by an industry that values image over integrity. And now you can't handle it when someone holds up a mirror. Michael stood too. Taller, calmer, but now done playing polite. George stepped back. This is wildly inappropriate for a professional interview. Inappropriate, George hissed, just inches from Michael's face, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, barely picked up by the mic. What's inappropriate is actors like you thinking you can waltz onto serious news programs and expect a free ride. You've built a brand, not a legacy. And now you're crumbling because someone isn't kissing your ass. That was it. Michael unpinned his mic and placed it calmly on the desk. He said, steady as ever, George, I don't know what's going on with you today, personally or professionally, but I'm not here to be your outlet. I came for a respectful conversation, not a character assassination. This interview is over. George's face twisted in fury. You don't get to decide when this ends. This is my show, my set, my questions. You'll sit down and answer them until I say otherwise. Michael didn't flinch. Actually, I don't have to do anything. I'm a guest, not a hostage. I showed up voluntarily, and I'm leaving the same way, now that you've abandoned every standard of decency. He turned and walked toward the exit. The studio was dead silent, until George's voice rang out, desperate and bitter. Run away then, just like you always do when someone asks real questions.
Show the world what kind of man you really are!
Michael stopped in his tracks. He turned around slowly, looked George dead in the eye, and delivered the moment that would go viral within minutes. George, everyone watching can already see what kind of man I am. I came here to have a conversation about my work. I kept my composure while being insulted, misrepresented, and pushed. I know when to walk away from something toxic, and more importantly, I don't need to belittle anyone to feel powerful. He glanced at the cameras. But as for what kind of man you are, I think the entire country just found out. With that, Michael B. Jordan walked off the Good Morning America set. George stood alone, flushed and seething, chest rising and falling as the silence settled over him. The cameras kept rolling. The damage was done. Security personnel, called in during the chaos, finally entered the studio, but there was nothing left to secure. Michael had left with his dignity intact. George, however, had torched his. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Viewers were stunned. Many demanded George's resignation. Others praised Michael for showing how to stay composed under fire. George's attempt to humiliate his guest had detonated in his face. His credibility shattered, his reputation tarnished. Meanwhile, Michael had walked out not just with integrity, but with a masterclass in grace under pressure. What did you think of this jaw-dropping moment? Ever seen a morning show spiral this hard? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable stories from live TV gone totally off the rails.